Welcome back. Today we are going to talk about the collaboration between TFZ and Angelears, which you can kind of see right there. This one is called Athena, and if someone told me they were just going to buy it just for the look, for the color blue, the matching shells, and the cable, I'd be perfectly fine with that. It's actually a really stunning set to hold and to see. Really, really nice coordination between, the faceplate and the shell. This blue is actually quite stunning. I think it is very pretty, or very close to, I think, Angelears blue. I think they tend to use blue theme things, and I think this is sort of no different. So the TFZ logo is sort of 3D there. It's kind of bubbled, kind of on the top with a nice dome over it. And yeah, this is the gold version. There is a silver version. The faceplate is blue, but it does have that little wave of kind of whitish, and there's a little green in there. Yeah, very, very, very nice. And yeah. And on the back, so this one is a single dynamic driver. It does have kind of a special driver, and if you look on their website for the listing, you'll kind of see there's kind of a little assembly for it, so it's kind of hard to see what it really looks like, but that is what it looks like there. And again, this one is kind of a slightly different faceplate from the other one, with the blue plus some little additional colors in the corner. But yeah, absolutely kind of stunning to look at. Again, matching fork core, blue cable, and kind of the perfect blue to match. Really, really well done. Really well thought out on the color scheme. The box is here. It's in silver. I'm not sure why it's not blue as well, but silver is nice. You do get a tip carve that looks like this, kind of whiteboard tips is what I would call those. And you do get a TFZ pouch, which looks like that. So we'll kind of jump into it, and I will say first, we are approaching the 15th annual AliExpress sale. So this is a few days early to the sale when I'm actually recording it, but there will be a special promotion on this one. I'm just not sure exactly what it's going to be. March 16th or 17th through about the 27th. On the listing that I can see today, it says about $99 USD. There's I think three different prices. There's a $139 price, which may be the retail price. There's $129, which I thought is also the retail price. There's also a $99 promotional price, which may be for that period of time. There may be free gifts included. But as of right now, this is all recorded before I can actually see the change and what the actual offer is going to be. So I can't guarantee any of these things are going to happen, but I can only kind of report what I see on the listing as it exists today. So what is this one? This one is Angelears partnering with TFZ to bring back kind of a TFZ sound. We haven't heard TFZ sets in quite a while. I think they've been kind of sporadic over the last couple of years, but TFZ does have a long single dynamic driver heritage, and this collaboration between the two is really about modernizing TFZ's experience and heritage with single dynamic drivers. Angelears has kind of a more modern take on tuning and some of the things that they've partnered with on other brands. They tend to bring a little slightly slant on what other brands do and then kind of put the AE tilt on it. And I think this is along those lines as well. So this driver is actually called the TFZ X1 beryllium plated driver. I'm not sure we'll see that driver again, or if this is one they've actually used in the past, but the listing actually calls it the X1. So on the graph, and I will say that the graph is something to look at on this one, but I don't think it necessarily encompasses what's special about this one. And I sort of hesitate to talk about it. And comparing it to TFZ number 3, that's not really a good comparison. But it does kind of talk about the past of where TFZ came from. And TFZ number 3 was, back at the time, a very classic bass headset. It was affordable. I think it was pretty close to this one, maybe $129, somewhere right around there. But very sub bass heavy, and then it kind of tilted down the treble, and that is a very classic bass head style tilt, more bass, less treble. And when we look at Athena in the blue, it's more of a modern, fun take on it, where they actually tilted down the sub bass. You have this V shape, and then you have kind of an extension on the treble. So yeah, I would call Athena more of a fun, balanced V shape as opposed to what TFZ was or is. So yeah, I sort of buy into the story of this is TFZ's heritage on dynamic driver, their experiences with those, and then this is kind of Angelears' take on the tuning and what they believe is more of a modern take on that older style tuning. So this modern take on V-shape, as the sub bass is tilted down, this will give you a quicker or a quick hitting style. There's a little bit more clarity to it, better imaging, more air, but overall it just has a faster sound to it. There's more agile to it than it looks on the graph. And like I said, this whole little bit here where there's a really big mid bass bump, you're kind of thinking that's going to be a slow, thick style mid bass, but it's actually not. And it's the combination of this driver and something else that they did. It actually comes across, tilting this down, bumping this out with a faster driver has a different sound than what you're thinking of in your head by looking at that graph. And I think there have been lower energy versions of this tuning, flatter style V shapes than this one. But this is just another style that's really less often found in lower volume sets. And I think ND Planet was probably a good idea. NFZ or ND Planet was actually pretty close to TFZ number 3, right? It was this sub bass heavy, ear gain heavy, and then they kind of rolled off the treble. And that's an older sound. It's kind of back from the sound of a number 3. And the problem with that is you don't get a whole lot of this, and especially at lower volume, you kind of get bogged down in the sub bass. It doesn't have the impact or the speed that you're going to get on Athena, and you don't have the extension and air and upper treble that you get on Athena. So I will say that more sets are like ND Planet in that respect, and it's just easier to throw in a whole lot of sub bass and throw in a whole lot of ear gain, and you end up with a nice fun V shape. But Athena is a little bit different, and like I said, I'm not sure who actually tuned this, if it's TFZ or Athena, but the guy had a pretty good ear for what things should sound like, and from kind of an end-to-end balance of doing it in a low volume, but being able to pick the right value of sub bass, mid bass, ear gain, and then upper treble, so everything can be heard, and that's pretty rare at lower volume. And again, I think this set costs a little bit more, and I wish it was probably about $79 so people can hear what this sounds like on this driver, because I do think it's a little bit unique, and nothing really comes to mind like what's the closest set to this one. There's nothing that kind of feels as fast that's in this shape. There's probably some neutral bright sets that sound a bit similar, but by not going neutral bright, by actually adding in some mid bass, this one is a little bit different. It's a little bit better, and I like it because they did this without it being kind of a slow and muddy and slick or thick version of this style tuning. So yeah, I'm not sure any of this is going to convey in the review of kind of where this one lands and why it is different, but we'll kind of go through it. So sound wise, I'll say again, it's not neutral bright. And you can kind of look at the graph and say, yeah, I understand it's not neutral bright, but it actually sounds more neutral bright than it is because of the clarity and resolution and the speed that gets kind of presented through in the lower half and into the mids. It presents more like neutral bright, but the sound wise, it's not quite neutral bright. And again, this is going to be super confusing, but it is more of a balanced V. And as you would expect, a little bit less sub bass, you're going to get better imaging, a little bit more mid bass, you're going to get more of a more natural sound, more natural mids, and it does sound like a speedy single dynamic driver. And on the bass, I will say there's kind of two components to the sound that they have achieved here. One is the drivers on the faster side. So again, I think this beryllium plated driver they picked is actually quite nice, and it does have a speedy feel to it. It's on the faster side. There isn't a whole lot of persistence to it to cloud the imaging, but there also is a healthy boost or a healthy level of mid bass there, and that is going to be tempered by the ear gain. So these two are going to sort of work in combination with each other. And I do like that they picked a little bit more mid bass right there than sub bass. They tilted that down. But it's also going to be harder to tune that because you are relying on, there's almost a track dependence to it. This assumes that this mid-bass level is going to be balanced by something over here in the same track, and those two are going to work together and they're going to have a nice balance to them. But when you have, more mid-bass and not treble in your track, or more treble in your track and not as much mid-bass, you kind of lose that balance. And that's why the flatter V is a little bit safer tuning. And that's why I said you don't really see this all that often, because there is this sort of dependence on music that is equally balanced, and that actually does sound quite nice when you have a track that actually lands in both of those. It's just harder to tune that way. And again, why the flatter V would be a little bit a safer choice. But on the mids, again, you're kind of expecting recessed mids because looks like a big bump here. It looks like a nice V shape. But you're tilting down the sub bass. That is going to give you a little bit more clarity. You're boosting the ear gain. That's going to move things a little bit more forward. And even at lower volume, that's kind of what you hear. But you still can't escape the tuning, right? It's still a V shape. It still has a boosted bass. It still has a boosted ear gain. There's still basically this ear gain is going to ride right on top of that, and you're going to get this nice higher end, this upper mid version that's very present, but it's still going to have a lower end on the body part on that. And that's kind of what's different about a lot of sets that were closer to the Harman target. They would bump the ear gain, but you get a thin version and then a thinner version because there wasn't enough mid bass down there. So this is actually kind of nice. The way these two are balanced together and the way you do get the energy of the upper mid, but then you still have the lower body part of the mid bass. And again, I think that it's actually quite nice. The guy who did this obviously has a pretty good ear, and I think he actually got that down pretty well. And again, this kind of tuning in this style with the ear gain right about there, I think this does sound better on a single dynamic driver. It's just going to be a little bit more natural, a little not as thin as a balanced armature was going to be, and not as thin as even a dynamic driver plus a balanced armature. I think this tuning would have been very challenging on that style because this would have been very thin, and you probably would have had to bump that. You probably would have had to bump up the sub bass just to balance out what a balanced armature at this price would have been. So again, I think lots and lots of right choices here, and a tuning that really worked really well on the single dynamic driver, and even better on the single dynamic driver that they chose. So the treble, again, this one is still going to be an upper mid, lower treble heavy, but tilting down the sub bass over here is really the magic to a lot of this tuning. And it really allows upper treble and air to be heard. And at lower volume, it sounds more extended and open than bright. This actually looks quite bright, but at lower volume, it's actually not bright. And I'll kind of explain this in a second. But this is very much a modern take on what most sets have missed at the lower price points. There aren't that many sets at a lower price point that actually got this right, even at lower volume. And when we look at, I can't remember how many times I've actually complained about the sub bass level and the air level, right? The two don't really work together well. If you have a 10 dB sub bass level over here, it is super hard to actually hear air on that side. So most sets do exactly what TFZ number 3 does, and most sets actually sound like TFZ number 3. They have a huge sub bass component, and then you raise the ear gain, and you're like, oh, these two balance out, and that all sounds fine, and this looks big, but it's not really big because there's a whole lot of sub bass. That is all fine, but you can't hear this at all. So what TFZ did, and again, the guy who tuned this actually kind of knew what he was doing. So you tilt down the sub bass, that actually gives you a lot more audible upper air, upper treble. This whole thing sounds way more extended than you're expecting it to sound, considering there's a big V here, considering the number of times that I've said, well, when you raise the ear gain above 10 dB, it becomes very hard to hear this. Very true, except when you do this. So typically brands are doing this. They're raising the sub bass, they're raising the ear gain, and you can't hear any of that. This whole make the air region a lot more audible by tilting down the sub bass, by raising this a little bit. That's just going to move things forward. You turn down the volume because it's a lower volume set, and now you have a really nicely extended lower volume set, which is actually quite hard to find. And again, kind of why I said that the set doesn't really match a lot of other sets, especially below its price point, because of how well extended this is at lower volume, and how the guy actually got this to line up and hear everything from end to end. It's actually really, really well done. And to do it in a non-neutral bright tuning is even harder to do. And like I said, it will present a little bit more like neutral bright because of everything that you can hear end to end. But having a little bit of mid bass there for body is going to give it a more natural sound than you're expecting from neutral bright. And again, they knew what they were doing, so I'll kind of leave it at that. Stage, again, not bad. The ear gain is kind of a little bit too high to give you a whole lot of depth, but you do get nice width and nice height, because now you can essentially hear end to end. You have really nice imaging, and again, it will actually stage more like a neutral bright than a V shape, and a lot of that is kind of dipping that, pushing that a little bit forward. That's a little bit flatter, but then being able to hear the upper treble is going to make things sound a little bit higher in stage. So yeah, lots of good things that'll happen here. I do hope that either TFZ or Angelears kind of pushes this idea forward, because the guy that tuned this is actually quite good at what he does. So I hope we see another one of these down the road. So thank you guys again for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.